What does retirement income with $500,000 in an IRA plus Social Security look like for a single person? Hi, this is Drew Erickson with the Five Stone Financial Group, where we specialize in helping empty nesters turn a lifetime of hard work into a more confident retirement. It's Monday, January 12th, and this is Money Not Math, episode 170, where I will be adjusting the scenario I went over in episode 162, where there's a hypothetical married couple with $500,000 in an IRA plus Social Security to show what it would look like if a single person had $500,000 in IRA plus Social Security, as one of the commenters requested on YouTube. And just fair warning, I have a head cold I got over the weekend, so please bear with my any speaking or sniffling issues that I may have. With that being said, let's dive in as I will share my screen and hopefully provide as much valuable value as possible. All right, here we go. All right. So we're gonna jump over to the planning software here. As you'll see, net worth $500,000 in an IRA, traditional IRA, 401k, 403b. It doesn't really matter what it's called as long as it's tax deferred. Rollover IRA. The point is, this hypothetical person, I called single person 500,000. I know, very original. Um, did not pay taxes on their savings while they were working. They defer to having to pay taxes into the point where they retire. Their goals, they're currently 67, so they're retiring right now. So they basically, this hypothetical situation is them walking to my office the day they retired saying, please help me. What can I do? Ideally, as will be illustrated, I'm sure, many times throughout this video, but if not, I want to emphasize it. I would encourage anyone and everyone to build a plan for retirement before they retire. In a perfect world, all of my clients would walk into my office 3 to 5 years before they retire because there's a lot of decisions that can be made before you retire that make a big impact. Once you're already retired, we'll do the best we can, but there are a couple of things you might miss out on. So, with that being said, this person's 67 years old, they're retiring right now. The monthly expense goal we set at 3,620 to reach an 80% probability of success. They have no other income sources besides their Social Security, which is an estimated $1,883. Again, I just got that from a Google search that states that's about the average. Depending on where you search and when you search, you'll get different numbers. But this aligns with Money Not Math episode 162, so hopefully that's helpful. Notice that because of when Social Security changed their laws, full retirement age it varies depending on when you're born. Because this person was born in 1959, making them 67 right now, their full retirement age was actually 66, not 67. So they could have took full retirement last year, not didn't actually have to wait till 67. But if you're born after 1960, it'll be 67 until or if the government changes the laws again. So just be aware that not all Social Security full retirement ages are the same. If you're born before 1960, it's sort of staggered. If you're born after 1960, it's more than likely 67. Continuing on, there's no ongoing savings going on or other expenses other than taxes. And I said they're 67 years old today. So let's check it out. With that being pulled up, here we see their probability of success is 80%. I've outlined this a few times in other videos, so I won't go too in depth. But for those who are new to this Money Not Math series and new to watching my videos, the reason why we're aiming for 80% probability of success is because there's two primary traps or issues or things that we're trying to guard against in retirement. The most important, if you imagine driving down the road, on one side of the road is the ditch on the left. In America, we drive on the right side, right? Is the ditch on the left or oncoming traffic, right? We really want to avoid that side of the road because that would relate to running out of money before we run out of breath. That is worst case scenario. We do not want to run out of money, run out of choices before we run out of breath. That's the number one fear of most people who are in retirement, according to most studies that I've seen. So that's number one. We want to avoid 0% probability of success, of course. On the other side of the road, the right side of the road, it's not as big of a deal, but still not great to end up in the ditch, is running out of money with more money than we need or more money than we intended to leave behind. Because what that means is that if we have a 100% probability of success, we probably aren't living our lives to the fullest that we could while in retirement. And for most of my clients, their number one goal and the reason they worked so hard their entire lives is so that they can enjoy their retirement. It's not to be miserable through retirement or not enjoying retirement to the point that they're leaving behind more money than necessary. So we try to find this balance that keeps us on the road of absolutely avoid the left side where we run out of money, and ideally avoid the right side too, where we don't get to enjoy retirement to its fullest. And that's where we fall in this 80% probability of success. So oftentimes if my client and me agree 80% is a good number to shoot for, if the probability of success gets up to 90%, we have the permission to spend more monthly, or maybe go on a vacation that wasn't planned, or buy a new car, or whatever it may be. If we get below 70%, all right, now we may need to start looking at tightening the belt a little bit. So now that you have a good understanding of those parameters, please reach out if you have questions, but I'm going to continue on. So in this example, this person's 67, and we're estimating they're going to live to 95. Now, this in itself is just an arbitrary assumption. Note that if you're a 67-year-old male retiring today, your life expectancy according to Social Security is around 85, 86. If you're a female, it's around 87, 88 for the average person. But everyone's life expectancy is different because everyone's lifestyle, family history, current health are different, right? So we really don't know. But generally speaking, I would rather plan for my clients to live longer than expected than not long enough to make sure we avoid running out of money before we run out of breath, right? But just to give you an idea of what this looks like if we change these assumptions, if we go from 95 to, let's say, 85, this person's probability of success jumps dramatically, right? Because now they have less time that their assets have to last. But that also shows us the importance of not under planning, right? If you expect to die at 85 and you don't, then what, right? Do you have a plan that's going to withstand for long enough? It may seem crazy, but my grandpa's currently 96 and only a few months away from being 97, right? So every day he lives, we're extremely grateful and appreciative he's still here with us and we get to go visit him. But that's one more day his money has to last, right? So living longer is actually a risk to retirement planning. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but let's go back to 95 just for this example's sake. All right, so the first thing we can talk about when it comes to retirement planning is there's many things out there that we can do to improve or potentially hurt your retirement planning if you aren't planning properly. But I'm going to cover a few main ones, them being asset allocation, Social Security, tax strategy, and retirement spending strategy. There are other ones, things I have not talked about too much in these videos in episode 162 and episode 179, I think, as I did last week on this as well. Is long-term care planning, is that important to you? If it is, we absolutely need to plan around it. Legacy strategies that are specific. Do you have an exact amount you want to leave your kids or a church? That can be impactful. Do you plan on traveling outside the country, or where are you going to live? What state do you live in? Minnesota taxes are different than other state taxes. Some taxes don't have state taxes. That makes an impact, right? So these are just some general ones that apply to pretty much everyone, but there are also more specific ones that should be talked about as well with your plan of trusted fiduciary financial advisor. So let's jump into asset allocation. So this person, hypothetical person's current asset allocation is a very simple 60-40 portfolio. 60% equities, 40% bonds. And the reason I use that is because I think that's generally the most common portfolio build out there. Let me just get rid of this little tab here. I was asking them questions. Um, Everyone's is different, but I think if you just were to Google or search 100 different portfolio recommendations for retirees, 60-40 is probably the most common one you'll see. It's not necessarily the one I use for most of my clients, but every situation is different. So I don't want to go too much down the rabbit hole outside of showing you the massive difference. On one end, we can go the preservation portfolio, which is about 10-20% equity, 89% fixed income. And the reason why you might do this is you might be the type of person that watches the news every day, worries a lot, you're super concerned about market volatility. You've convinced yourself, due to whether it's water cooler talk or the news or your cousin Johnny, that market volatility is the greatest risk to your retirement. So let's avoid it. Let's get as much of our money out of the equity and stock market into fixed income, CDs, cash, whatever it might be, to avoid volatility. And that might sound great short term. The problem is long term. Inflation, if you live long enough, is actually a greater risk to your retirement than market volatility depending on how you plan, right? So it really depends on how you allocate. Let's see what that does to this person's portfolio. Their probability of success drops from 80% to 34 because now as inflation hits at 3% a year on average, their portfolio may not be able to keep up with that in addition to paying for the rising cost of living, right? Because what do we know about inflation? It often outpaces Social Security growth. It often outpaces fixed income or cash growth. Okay, so especially in the last couple of years where we've seen 8 to 9% So on one end, preservation portfolios are great to avoid market volatility, but they're terrible at fighting inflation, or can be. We don't know for sure what the future brings. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we can go with the most aggressive, which is 90 to 100% equities and 0 to 10% fixed income and cash. The benefit, great at fighting inflation. The negative is you better be really good at avoiding the news and really good at not checking your portfolio balances because when the market's up, it's going to be way up. But when the market's down, it's going to be down, right? So what's that going to do to our portfolio? We're going to see an 85% probability of success. So more risk or more equity equals higher probability of success as long as you don't let human nature kick in and force you to make bad decisions based on emotional responses. Or if you just absolutely need that money because of a life event, selling equities when they're down can be detrimental. So that is why with our clients, we very intentionally build an income reserve so we know, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of your income you're taking from your portfolio is not dependent on the market. So whatever happens with volatility doesn't matter. And then we allocate the rest to fighting inflation, which allows our clients to have a little more comfortability with volatility while also efficiency with fighting the market. So those are the two extremes. Most people do not have 80, 90 to 100% of their portfolio in the market, but we do see it at times. And it also depends on what are your other income sources. Do you have a para? Do you have a pension? Do you have an inheritance? A lot, everything matters. So I strongly encourage you to take a good look at it. So I'm going to bring this back to moderate. We won't go through each and every one of these in this episode. So I'll just bring it back to the moderate 60/40 so we can go on and calculate the others. The next thing to calculate is Social Security. What is the optimal Social Security strategy? So what this is telling us is that the optimal Social Security strategy is for this single person to wait until age 70. And what they're going to do then is they'll leverage their IRA assets more early on to wait to let their Social Security max out at age 70. So the status quo strategy of turning on at 67, you're going to see about 22,596 a year. That jumps up to about 23,000. That goes up to about 20, almost 24,000 with cost of living adjustments. And at age 70, you're going to have about 24,000 for the year. And then age 71, you'll notice that the how it works out based on when they turn 70 in the year is kind of goofy. But the point is, age 71, if they turn on at 67, their Social Security will pay about 25,000 a year. If they wait till age 70, that full year, their full first year of Social Security is going to pay about 33,000. So that's almost an $8,000 increase by waiting 3 years. And when you go all the way out to age 95, if they turned it on at 67, their Social Security benefit would be about 45,000. Whereas if they waited till age 70, now their Social Security benefit would be about 59,000 and a half. So overall, waiting till age 70 is going to get this person hypothetically about 181,000 more from their Social Security benefit over their lifetime. So that's looking at Social Security in a vacuum, independently. Now let's look at how that potential weight could affect their overall planning in a nutshell, because it's important to note that sometimes what's best for your Social Security on its own isn't always best for your overall portfolio. It really matters what other assets you have, because in this example, let's say they only had $50,000 in their IRA. Well, waiting till age 70 isn't really an option. You're going to spend on all your assets, right? So it's really important to understand that every situation is different. So in this example, if we go to the optimal strategy and he waits till age 70, it's not only is it going to increase Social Security benefit by about 180,000, it's also going to increase his probability of success by about 10%. But let's check but what if they don't live to 95? What if he only lives to 75? Because this is the counter argument. If you don't have very good health, you don't expect to live very long, and your family history says you aren't probably going to live to 95, you're more likely to live to 75. Now, by waiting to age 70, you'll see the probability of success is 100% with 590,000. However, if they used the current strategy or age 70, 100,000, 100%, 535. If they would have done to age 67, 100%, 610. So I said a lot of numbers quick there. The point was, you can rewatch that a few times if you'd like. If you live less time, so 75, it's actually not necessarily beneficial to wait to age 7 to wait till age 70. So I apologize. Maybe I shouldn't have gone down that rabbit hole in a brief manner like that. But the point is, we don't know exactly how long you're going to live, but planning around Social Security is extremely important when it comes to how it impacts your other assets. And it's important to be honest with yourself of like, what's your current health, your current lifestyle, and your family history to kind of have an estimate of how long you may or may not live. Like I said, Social Security estimates the average person at 67 is going to live to 85 to 88 years old. Are you average, above average, below average, things like that. So next thing to discuss is tax strategy. All right, so if we come over to tax strategy, let's see if this single person should or should not consider Roth conversions. So what this is saying is that this person, the most ideal tax strategy they could have would be withdrawal strategy of taxable, tax deferred, tax free, up, and then Roth conversions up to the 10% tax bracket. So let's do taxable, tax deferred, tax free, up to the 10% ordinary income tax bracket, compared to the status quo of tax deferred, taxable, tax free, and no Roth conversions. And let's see a comparison. So if they do Roth conversions up to the 10% tax bracket, the proposed strategy is estimated to have about 204,000 more ending assets and 133,000 more tax adjusted ending assets. The federal tax paid is estimated to be about 30,000 less. So you'll notice the proposed strategy is the green. So it's very little until RMDs kick in, then it slowly increases. Oh, sorry, proposed strategies, Roth conversions. So the green, sorry, head's foggy. I got head cold, or my wife would call it man cold. The green is the Roth conversion strategy. So you can see you're leveling it out. It's a little bit in the beginning, about 1,200, and then that slowly increases as they age on a relatively consistent pattern, maxing out at the end about 6,900. Whereas if you don't do Roth conversions, it's going to be virtually nothing until RMDs kick in, or age 70 goes to 13,500, and then RMDs kick in, and now it jumps all the way up to 6,400, 6,446. So year one of RMDs, required minimum distributions, age 73. If you do Roth conversions, you're looking at about 1,438 of taxes owed. If you don't do Roth conversions and you're forced to take RMDs, you're going to owe about 6,446, and that's going to stay right about that level the whole time through. And once again, in this hypothetical example, you'll pay about 30,000 less by doing Roth conversions. Health, you're going to see the proposed strategy has 14% tax-free and 16% taxable, and the rest is tax deferred, whereas the reference strategy is 0% tax-free. And this is also something important. If you'd rather have all tax-free at the end, we could do tax deferred, taxable, tax-free as far as distributions go. And now you're going to have 82% taxable, 18% tax-free, and nothing tax deferred. So there's a lot of decisions that can be made on how do you want to leave money behind. All right. So bringing it back to the recommended ideal situation. I also want to show, because it was brought up to me in a comment on my last video, the difference between effective tax rate and actual tax bracket. So in this scenario, we're doing Roth conversions up to the 10% federal tax bracket. However, the effective tax rate is different than your tax bracket. The effective tax rate is the amount of taxes you're actually paying. So your proposed strategy is the green, or proposed plan is you're paying about 0.4% federal tax rate, effective tax rate, and at its peak, you're paying about 8.5% effective rate and 4.6% state tax. So you're not actually paying 10% just because you're doing Roth conversions up to the 10% bracket. Whereas the current plan, you're going to notice that at its peak when RMDs kick in, again, it's about 8.5 and set 4.6. So in this situation, the amount of taxes paid is only about 30,000 different, or less taxes paid, but how and when you pay them makes a dramatic difference because if you want to have choice, but also if the government changes tax brackets in the future when you haven't done Roth conversions, it could have a larger impact on you. So let's look at how the proposed strategy impacts this person. It takes the probability of success from 80% to 85%. That's a nice addition, right? Last but not least, we're going to look at the retirement spending strategy. I've talked about this in my other videos, but I'll just do a quick review again. I guess, default strategy that many people enter retirement with is, okay, what can I spend this year? And then I'll just increase my income each year based on inflation. What studies show, and what we believe to be true for most people, is that most people don't just increase their lifestyle to according to inflation. Most people enter retirement the youngest and healthiest they're ever going to be. They're excited. They want to travel. They might want to buy a new camper or a lake home or go see their grandkids more often, whatever it might be. They're doing more early. And then as they age, they slow down a little bit and they do less. And then as they age even more, medical costs skyrocket. So they creates what's called the retirement spending smile. So if this person did a retirement spending smile strategy rather than inflation adjusted strategy, now their probability of success jumps from 80% to 97% by simply spending the same amount the first year, but understanding how later in life they're probably going to be less active. I can promise you my 96-year-old grandpa, he has medical bills, yes, but as far as his lifestyle activity level is much less, right? And I'm sure we can all relate to someone who is much less active when they're 85 than they were when they were 75, and they're less active when they're 75 than they were when they were 65, right? So in this example, they could either stay with a 97% probability of success, or we could give them permission to spend more in year one. Let's see how much more. So would you rather spend about, just say 4,080? See if we get hone in on that number here. All right, so would you rather spend 3,620 a year and adjust for inflation, or have permission to spend 4,080, about $400 more, with the understanding that we're just expecting to spend a little bit less when we're older? That's for you to decide. So now let's reset this. So we've gone through the kind of the four main categories, hopefully clearly enough to be impactful for you. Just out of curiosity, what would happen if we optimized all of these? So I'm not going to put most aggressive because that's probably unrealistic, but let's go from 60-40 to 70-30 for a growth portfolio. Let's optimize our Social Security. Let's use the proposed tax strategy, and let's do retirement spending smile. Now this person goes from an 80% probability of success, same amount of money. They retired 500,000 with their Social Security. They go from 80% probability of success and a median ending portfolio of 457,000 to 100% probability of success and a median ending portfolio of 1.3 million. That's a dramatic difference. Or that's if they spend the same amount, or they could spend more. Let's see how much more they could spend if we optimized all of these four categories. Oh, 5,000 is too high. Let's try 4,500 and see what happens. 4,500, we're almost there. All right, so this person, if they optimize their asset allocation, or I guess technically it's not optimized, we use growth. We'll just stick with that because I don't think it's really realistic for most people to be 90 or 100% equity. But maybe if you have cash elsewhere. So let's give it a try. Most aggressive, just so you can see and I get an idea. Again, this is not a recommendation, it's a hypothetical example, but just to give you an idea of what could possibly be possible and how impactful it is to make decisions ahead of time or make choices about your retirement rather than letting it happen to you, let it happen for you. So this person has permission to, rather than spending $3,620 a year, to spend $4,460 a year, which some quick math tells us 4,460 minus 3,620, $840 more per month. That's a big difference. That's $10,000 more dollars per year. Would you take a $10,000 raise? I would. The same amount of money, same amount of Social Security, a $10,000 raise year one, I would take that all day, every day. I don't know why you wouldn't, but to each their own. Or put it mathematically, 840 divided by 3,620, that's a 23% raise. Not by adding anything to the situation outside of some potentially better decisions. All right. So that's Money Not Math episode 170. I'm going to stop sharing. Please let me know if you have questions, thoughts, comments, concerns. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch or listen to today's Money Not Math episode. Like I said, please help me provide more value to more people by sharing with a friend, sharing on your social media page, commenting with a question or a thought. Click subscribe if you're on YouTube, click follow if you're on Facebook or whatever platform you're on. Please check back in for future videos and let me know what future video topics you'd like to see. I love responding to requests and doing videos that are impactful to you. So please don't hesitate to reach out or comment. If you'd rather keep it private, You can message me directly on whatever platform you're on or call me at 218-686-3170. Disclaimer, this content is not legal, tax, or investment advice. You should always consult a qualified professional regarding your personal situation. Once again, thanks for bearing with my cold and hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.